Hey guys, it's me again, Curious HVAC guy here. So today I'm going to take you through a basic PM, preventative maintenance that I do on rooftop package units. Um, Keep in mind that certain customers want more things done, maybe less things done. They normally will provide you with a checklist and you just follow that checklist. It's really simple. But this is kind of just a video for people that maybe have never done a preventative maintenance before, kind of give you a roundabout idea of what to look for. So the first thing that you need to do is talk to the store manager, let them know why you're there, let them know that you're going to be shutting down the rooftop unit at some point in time, because there may be smoke alarms tied into the rooftop unit that will go off if you shut the power down without alerting the manager. Second thing I do before I get to the rooftop is I will adjust the thermostat to, I don't know, 65 or something, so I can ensure that by the time I reach the rooftop unit, it will be in cool mode. If I'm lucky, it'll be in stage 2 or 3 cool mode. Some customers may have an energy management company. You may have to call them and let them know to kick the units into AC mode. Or if you are familiar enough with the control boards, the communication boards that they have in the units, you can bypass them without very much difficulty and just bypass their board and get it to kick over into cool mode. With that being said, let me switch the camera here and we'll take a look at what I'm looking at. All right, guys. So we're at the rooftop now. The first thing I like to do when I get up to a package unit is I will record the data tag. I'll take a picture of it, make a note of the model and serial number. This unit I currently have turned off, really for video purposes. It's kind of hard to talk and get anything across with a package unit kicking on and kicking off. So going back to what I said previously, the first thing I like to do is I'll record my supply and return air temperatures. Now this is my return side right here. Normally there won't be a little tiny hole inside the cabinet. I just take a self tapper and I drill a little hole, stick my little probe through there, and then I just record the temperature. It's really simple. Be very careful though, just don't go willy-nilly putting self-tapping screws everywhere. So I'll record that's my return air temperature on that side. And as the unit's running, because of course, if you remember, I said that I put it in AC mode before I get up here. And then I'll come over here to my supply side and I'll take a supply temperature. Again, I just pop a little hole with the self-tapper in there so I can just get my temperature probe in there. And then once I have my discharge and supply temperatures, the first thing I like to do is I'll go over to the condensing unit, just kind of inspect it. This one's a little dirty, a little bit of dust on there, a little bit of cottonwood, because we're still in the middle of cottonwood season up here. Now this one, I don't know if it'll pick it up on camera, but you can kind of see through it. So even though there's a little bit of cottonwood on the front of it, this condensing coil is pretty clean. It's a microchannel coil, also, if you wonder why it kind of looks a little bit thinner than some of the coils you're familiar with. That one's not too terrible. Maybe in a month after cottonwood season, I probably come back and clean it. Also, get up underneath there, check underneath there. That's again not too bad. I'm kind of a hands-on type of guy, so when I walk up to these and they're cooling, I'll just put my hand on there, just feel it, just feel the air moving through it, see if the condensing coil is really hot. Put your hand over the condensing fan. Sometimes it is hard to detect if these fans are spinning the right way just by putting your hand over them. So I'll throw my hat on top of there. Obviously, if your hat blows off, spinning the right way. If it sticks and it sucks down, it's probably not spinning the right way, and you probably have a dead condensing fan motor, meaning this one has died and this one is the only one working, so it's sucking air through this side, over to this side, and then out this side. It's a pretty common occurrence in these. So once I'm all done with that portion of things, I'll just kind of walk back over here and I'll take a peek at my P-trap. Now this one, before I turned the camera on, I pulled it off and cleaned it, but these are pretty clean. They just pop right off there. I just whack them against the side of the rooftop unit, just get all the gunk out from inside there. But this one, there was nothing in there. As you can tell, if it's picking it up on camera, that we've had quite a bit of moisture pouring out of this thing. Now, again, keep in mind that when I'm doing this, this unit would normally be running right now. So what I'll do before I do anything else, once I've done all that other stuff that I just listed, I'll go through and I'll get my amp draws of my compressor, stage 1, stage 2. I'll make a recording of that. I'll go in here and I'll get a amp draw of my condensing fans, my indoor blower, motor. I'll record that. I will do the capacitors, but that comes later. There is a way to check capacitors with the unit on under load. You just need to take an amp draw of the start winding that's hooked up to the capacitor, and then you take the voltage, and I believe, if I remember correctly, you take the amp draw times 2,652, which is just a given number created by scientists, maybe Elon Musk, who knows. But you take that number, multiply it, and then you divide that number by the voltage, and that should give you the capacitance for the capacitor under load. The safest way to do it is wait until you're done doing all your checks with the unit running, and then you just discharge the capacitors, and then you check them when they're off. That's the safest way to do it. Also with the unit running, what I like to do, get in a little bit closer here. If you can see, that's set to 230. This unit is actually 208. I verified that before I shut the unit off. So what will happen if this unit is only at 208 and I am on the 230 side of the primary, or the primary side of the transformer anyway, we could have a fluctuation in our low side, meaning that if I'm hooked up to 230, that low side may not quite step down to 24 volts. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this from 230 over to 208, because that is how it should be. Also, while I'm in here staring at wires, I'll just look for any burn marks. I'll pull these covers off. These two little screws here will come off, and I'll look inside there and see the contact points of the contactors, and just see if they're pitted, if they're starting to get really bad from opening and closing all the time. Normally after a couple years they should be replaced because they get a lot of carbon buildup from arcing. I'll go up here, just kind of double check everything. Wiring looks good. I'll make sure none of my thermostat wires are loose. None of my spades came loose. This right here is an energy management board, communication panel, if you will. All my wiring looks good. This is a, I don't know, 5-6 year old unit, so it's not too terrible. Now, once I'm done with that section, I'll step around to the compressor section. If you can kind of see back there, those are our filters. This particular customer uses a filter media. They have a company that comes out and just replaces the filter media. I have nothing to do with that. Those aren't too terrible though. They're pretty clean, so I'm not too worried about that. But I'll just kind of check around my compressor, my discharge line, suction line, just see if I have any rubbing, any oil stains, anything that could cause a potential problem in the upcoming summer months. I don't see anything too bad over there. Then I'll come over to my blower section. I always like to just take a picture or record the blower belt number, and I'll write it on the door. I'll write it in the blower assembly somewhere, just in case it ever wears off the belt and nobody knows what size belt you need. I also kind of like to get in here, squeeze the belt a little bit. This one is pretty tight. It's got maybe 3/4 to an inch of deflection. So that one's not bad. I'm not going to adjust that at all. That one's pretty darn good. What I also like to do is spin this. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but you want to look at this belt straight on and make sure that this drive pulley and that blower pulley in the back there are straight on. If they're not, you're going to need to adjust one or the other, because you're going to have all sorts of belt issues if you don't do that. Also, once I have the belt off, I like to go in here and just look at the inside part of this pulley, make sure that it's not too worn out. It should have just a slight angle to it. Sometimes after years and years of just running nonstop, they'll start to wear flat, and this belt will ride unevenly. One side might have a nice smooth side to it. This one might be dipped down a little bit. If that's the case, of course, just quote to replace it. And we step over to our TXVs. These ones are really nice. These have a plastic coating on all the distribution lines, so I'm not too worried about those. Normally, I like to just go through here and make sure I don't have any copper on copper anywhere. Make sure there's nothing that's going to rub out and create a leak for our customer in the future. Now down there is our heating section. This is a spring summer PM, so I'm not doing anything with that. That'll be a future video where we'll go through and kind of cover the heating portion of things. But another thing too, it doesn't happen too much on the inside of package units, but these little holes right here, they help the motor stay cool. So if you ever come across one that's maybe, I don't know, full of dirt or lint or whatever, just take a brush, get that junk out of there. It'll save that motor, you know, give it a couple more years. Stuff like this, wires just kind of flapping here. This one's not too terrible, but anywhere we have wires just kind of flopping around, make sure that they can't rub against bare metal. You know, stuff like this down in this corner, you want to make sure that's not rubbing up against metal, because obviously that's going to create a problem in the future. Another thing that I don't believe I mentioned earlier is, again, keep in mind that when I walk up to this unit, it should still be cooling. However, make sure you don't try to grab that belt like I just did with the unit running. Use a little bit of common sense. If you don't have any common sense, you probably shouldn't be in this trade, because you're going to need some common sense. If you don't have any, I don't know, maybe you can find a school or a night class where you can go take some common sense lessons. But again, getting back to my point, so when I walk up to these units, they should be cooling, and both of my condenser fan motors will be running. That's, of course, if my ambient temperature is high enough, if my discharge temperature is high enough, if there's no fan cycling switches, which would be a lesson your lead tech should teach you. But when I first shut power off to these units, I'll watch the condensing fan motors and just kind of see if one stops really quick, or if they both kind of slow down and then they eventually come to a stop, you know, a nice slow controlled stop. If you have one that stops abruptly, much sooner than the other one, the bearing in that condensing fan motor is probably going bad. That's probably worth notating and letting the customer know. I also like to take a look at the gas line. This one looks pretty good. I mean, it's old, but it is what it is. There's no cracks. I mean, it's fully supported. I'm not too concerned about it cracking in the future. There's my disconnect. I already checked my fuses. On this particular style of disconnect, you've probably seen these if you've ever done residential. They're real common in residential. But what I'll do is I'll pop these fuses out, and these prongs that the fuse sit in, the fuse holders, they can become loose. And what will happen is, if these fuses aren't making a good tight contact with these copper prongs, it'll start to warm up. And when it heats up, it'll eventually blow this fuse. So I pop these out and kind of tighten them up a bit with some needle nose pliers, and then just pop it back in there when you're done. I go back to my wiring. The biggest thing when you are done with these, always remember to kick the disconnect back on. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to do that, and how many calls I've been out on where a previous tech had done a PM and he forgot to do that. So always remember to kick that back on. Last but not least, normally on some of these units, let me step back here to give you a bigger picture. Normally on some of these units, right here around this big square, you would have what's called an economizer, which is really just a fancy word for free cooling during the fall months. If you were working at a restaurant, if you were at some store or something where they produce a lot of heat inside, rather than kick on mechanical cooling, you would want the unit to be able to just bring in outside air, because if it's fall, you know, you're looking at 40-50 degrees outside, so there's no point in kicking on mechanical cooling when you can just open up a panel and bring in outside air. So normally there will be an economizer here, there will be a motor, an enthalpy sensor, and it'll open up. This unit is not equipped with an economizer. It's just there for looks, basically. There's no actual actuators or motors or sensors inside this unit to kick the unit into free cooling. Now, if you do have one, the only thing I really do with economizers when I'm doing a preventative maintenance is I will just adjust the minimum position setting just to make sure the motor is actually opening and closing. Beyond that, there's really not much else I can do on those. But that really wraps up a preventative maintenance on a rooftop package unit. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Again, this is just a basic PM. There might be stuff that customers want, stuff that customers don't want. One of the things that I've heard customers say they wanted is, out of preventative maintenance, they want us to record refrigerant pressures, which, unless they really twist your arm into doing it, I would highly recommend against that. Even if you have smart probes or something where it's not going to release a whole heck of a lot of refrigerant if you tap into that sealed system. But the only time you should ever hook up gauges to a sealed system is if you have a problem that you can't diagnose any other way besides hooking into the sealed system. Once you hook into the sealed system, you remove refrigerant, you have the chance of introducing moisture, non-condensables, all sorts of bad stuff can happen. So I would recommend against that. But hope you enjoy the video. Like and subscribe.